Serious people who killed in self-defense. What's your story? Shared this before, but I was staying with my grandfather while my parents were out of state, and I woke up to a noise coming from upstairs main floor. I was in the basement and just knew it wasn't my grandfather. He has hearing damage from Vietnam and it didn't wake him up, but there was banging around and heavy footsteps. I was in the room with the gun cabinet, so I grabbed a shotgun and went to check it out. When I got to the top of the stairs I just saw a guy in the living room going through stuff, so I pressed the safety and said he needed to leave. He turned around and saw my unthreatening scared as shit 14-year-old self and told me to just go back downstairs and mind my business, so I repeated myself. He turned around and started walking towards me with something in his hand, so I fired. At this point my grandpa is very awake and comes out of his room and just tells me to look away and call the police. Thankfully, due to all the factors of him being a repeat offender, having a weapon, my age, and castle laws, it didn't go any further than the police coming and asking me questions. It messed me up for a while, and I still think about it often, but I got over it and realized that as unfortunate as it was, I didn't have a whole lot of options at that point. I want to comment on this to get it off my chest, since I don't have opportunities to talk about this with my friends, since I'm scared of what they will think. I was born in Honduras. I live in the US now, and from what I remember, it was a very deserted place. I spent most of my time with my walking to this girl's house who was around 16 years old. A couple other kids would come to her house, since education was hardly accessible. She would teach us our shapes, animals, colors etc. After class was over I went home, and I heard my aunt scream from the kitchen. And then I remember that my uncle kept a gun hidden covered in rocks beside our old bathtub outside. That's where we bathed. He knew how dangerous it could be in this area, so he prepared me for everything. Went around the back and grabbed it as fast as I could. I went in and bested a man with a knife threatening my aunt. I didn't really grasp what was happening, but I shot him without any second guesses like I was taught by my uncle. I honestly still don't believe I did something like that to this day, and I don't know what would have happened to my aunt if I didn't get there sooner. I still don't feel comfortable talking about this to my friends, but I just want to get it off my chest. Sorry for any grammar mistakes. English isn't my first language. Edit. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and thank you for the silver, gold, and platinum, kind stranger. I was 12, the oldest of 3 brothers. We were home alone while my parents were out on date night. At maybe 10 PM we hear a loud banging at the front door before a man broke the lock with his sheer body weight and momentum. I told my brothers to hide in my room while I went to my parents' room for their shotgun. The whole time this guy's yelling about where are my keys, and he starts coming upstairs when he heard me fumbling as I tried to load the shotgun. He flung the door to my parents' room open, and I fell back with the gun shaking in my hands. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger twice. The first one caught him in the legs and the recoil made the second shot catch his entire torso. The poor man had been drunk and lived a few houses down the way, but I didn't learn that until after. All I could focus on was how he was begging his mother she wasn't there not to let him die, and that he was sorry he let her down as he slowly died on the floor just feet away from me. Worked for an armed messenger service, those guys that drop off cash and pick up deposits from banks/businesses in the armored trucks. Not even 10 AM, and as I was opening the door to the truck, I saw a huge guy. I'm not tiny, over 6 feet and well proportioned in the mirror meant just for this thing get out of a car and run towards me. He put me in a choker hold and started grabbing for my gun. He manhandled me like I weighed nothing. Would have easily gotten the gun if it wasn't a L3 holster. I managed to draw it, press it against him, and started pulling the trigger before I blacked out. I have no idea what he would have done if he got the gun, and I'm not used to just being tossed around like that. He turned out to be blind drunk and played for a college football team. When I was 13, I was babysitting my younger brother. Parents were out having a dinner date. At the time my family lived on a dirt road, away from the city. Quiet place, so my parents didn't think much of leaving me alone with my 9-year-old little brother for an hour or two. I was putting him to bed when I heard a knock on the door. This knock was loud, and he banged several times, before stopping for a moment. Then I heard glass shatter. I immediately grabbed my .22 long rifle my parents got for me, and hid in my little brother's room behind his bed with rifle, mounted at the door. Told him to hide under the bed, and make no noise whatsoever, no matter what happens. I had forgotten about my cell phone on the kitchen table halfway across the house. I remember thinking to myself to protect my little brother at any cost. I heard a lot of noises coming from inside my house. First in the kitchen, then living room, then my room, then finally the hallway to my little brother's room. As the door opened I seen a unfamiliar guy. He quickly seen me then rushed me. As there was a good 5 to 10 steps from the door to my brother's bed I fired all the rounds in my rifle 5 rounds. If anyone is wondering. I just remember him dropping on the floor with a loud thud, my brother crying, and out of blood. I called my parents, after which they called the police. After talking with my parents, they told me the police said that the guy was our next door neighbor and a registered sex offender, most likely was staking out the house and he noticed we were home, but our parents weren't. Honestly, it hasn't affected me as an adult. I did what had to be done, and I don't regret anything. Needless to say, any future dinner dates my parents had back then they brought us along, which was nice. I've shared this before, not sure if it was accidental, but while in college in my first apartment, I came home from work at 3 AM. Some dude was in the hallway outside my door, and I had a bad feeling about it. I paused and went to get the mail, hoping he would leave. Nope. I come back, and he is waiting at my door. I asked him what was up, and he said he was looking for John. My name is not John, and I lived alone. I asked him to move, and let me in my door. He told me to duck off and get John. I slid between him and the door, opened it and he pushed his way in. I pushed him out. He took a swing at me. I swung back hitting him in the eye, which caused him to fall back and hit his head. Out cold. Forever. Apparently John was the guy who lived in the apartment before me. The dead guy spent 5 years in jail because of John ratting him out for drugs. Dead guy came to get some revenge. Got dead instead. My wife and I were awakened in the middle of the night by someone banging on our sliding glass door on the porch. I turned on the outdoor lights and saw a shirtless man pacing back and forth, smacking the glass with his palms hard. As soon as he saw me in the light he went berserk, smashing against the door even harder, trying to open the door or lift it off the tracks to get in. I shouted to him to calm down, calm down, calm down. By the way, shouting for someone to calm down never works. He looked like someone you'd see in one of those exotic drug freakouts on YouTube, unresponsive, zombie-like. All I could imagine was him coming in to smash us to bits. He seemed super strong and didn't know how the glass was withstanding his blows. My wife was on the phone with the cops while I was trying to mellow him. He eventually gave up on the door and smashed his way out through the screen porch. I thought it was over, but heard my wife shout "He's coming around the side." I heard banging on the glass of our bedroom window. He was smacking hard against it until I heard crash and the glass was shattered. At that point I switched from pure fear into fear and anger. I was in the kitchen and scanned for a weapon. I grabbed the butcher knife from the top of the knife block, thinking what the hell am I going to do with this? I couldn't mercy kill a rat in a trap, let alone stab someone. Maybe I'll just poke at him to scare him off. I ran into the bedroom. He had smashed another window and I could hear him trying to crawl through the blinds. I screamed at him to leave, or I'd kill him. Took a poke at him which was deflected somehow. Then fear and anger switched to pure fury. I plunged the blade into his chest with all my strength. I still can feel that thrust to this day. It was awful. That snapped him out of whatever state he was in. He screamed my chest and ran off. The cops found him a couple houses down the street, dead in a pool of blood. The first days after were just shock and disbelief. But family, friends, my counselor were all supportive. I half-assed went into work over the next week or so, even though my boss said to take whatever time I needed. Time healed quicker than I thought it would. The man was not under the effects of drugs. He'd had a bad schizophrenic episode. He had fought with someone in a nearby group home, was locked in his room, then escaped through his window. Before the carriage driver discovered the escape, he had tried to get into 2 other houses in the neighborhood before coming to mine. I wish I knew more about him and hope he is at peace. I think about him every day. I felt like I was spared and given another chance. I appreciate life's little gifts more now. It somehow made me a better person. At least I hope. I hope he's better now too. One night I was walking home, pretty late, like 2 AM in the morning. I was 16 at that time and I happened to pass a bar. One drunk old dude said, "Hey, come here and buy me a beer." I started to walk faster and pretend I didn't hear him. Right after that he jumps on my back, trying to choke me. Managed to fall hard on my back, was still piggy riding me unfortunately. When we fell he hit his head on the curb. I was back at my home country during a civil war. Some people started going to random villages and draft males and use them as soldiers. They eventually came to our house and took me a 12-yo and my brother a 10-yo. It was a few hours drive until we eventually reached a checkpoint where we would be stationed. Them being animals, one of the commanders took me and my brother to an abandoned building close to that checkpoint and then took off his gear and was trying to grate my brother. I was scared and in a panic I grabbed a decent sized rock and hit him in the back of the head before he can do anything to my brother. He fell and I got on top of him and smashed his face over and over and over with the rock until it was caved in. Me and my brother then ran from that abandoned spot through some mountains and kept running until we reached a city nearby. We went to a nearby mosque, washed the blood off of us, and told the sheikh in that area to help us and that we were from said village. To our luck he was a decent human being and returned us back to our village. A few years later we moved to the US. My brother killed himself 2 years ago and I'm still in school. Neither me or my brother told anyone about what happened in that spot. All they know is that we escaped. I was with an abusive ex who would come home drunk every night. One night, we had a fight. I had my phone on vibrate, and that obviously meant I was sleeping with other PPL behind his back. He left for a while and came home drunker than I'd ever seen him. He wasn't making coherent sentences, but he lunged at me and wrapped his hands around my neck and sat on my chest. I thought I was going to die. I had done some BJJ when I was younger and managed to pull me legs up under his crotch, and then with everything I had, I pushed him off me. He hit his head on the sharp corner of a table we had in the living room and went still. I figured he had been knocked out, so I went outside and called the police. I was gonna put his ass in jail. I had the deepest purple bruises in perfect fingerprint form around my neck. He would have gone to jail. I smoked a cigarette outside, walked back in after I calmed my nerves, just to make sure he wasn't awake and coming for me. He had a huge pool of blood under him. It was almost black looking, so I stood there trying to figure out WTF I was looking at. Put 2 and 2 together, and the rest is history. Years of therapy. Self-defense plea. Open and shut. Edit. Thanks for the awards, although I'm not so sure this deserved them. To answer some questions really quickly, I was toxic and terrible in my early 20s, had some priors, and I was taken into the police station. To say I was charged would probably be going too far. I wasn't, so I should worded that better. I simply mean, everything was investigated. I did stay in a holding facility overnight. IDKY exactly. I live in a town that's less than 1 kppl, so it's not like a big city with big smart cops. His mom was in prison and his sister lived in Idaho, so I haven't spoken with either. I was asked to not attend THR funeral. I'm so far from a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master that it's insane. Had a very brief brush with it when my brother took it. I wasn't thinking when this assault occurred other than escape and survive. Yeah, I'd be surprised what you can do when you have to in order to live.